So this Chris Paul Lakers thing has been making noise on the internet a little bit lately. I don't think it happens. Now, maybe I'm wrong on that one and I'll end up looking stupid for this, but I don't think the Lakers are going to trade for Chris Paul for a few different reasons. Number one, it would mess up the Lakers' cap space after next season. Now, I know LeBron and AD don't give a damn about cap space, but the front office certainly does, and they've positioned themselves in a way in which they can go for a real free agent after next year when the really good free agency class comes in. I mean, there's Giannis, there's Kawhi and PG if the Clippers thing doesn't work out. There's non-superstars but still really good players like Drew Holiday, Gordon Hayward, Spencer Dinwiddie. I don't think Dinwiddie, Hayward, or Drew would require max contracts, but there's a lot of players. And if the Lakers traded for Chris Paul, then they would not have a chance at going for any of those guys. So that's the first thing. Now again, maybe the pressure of LeBron and AD and Clutch Sports is so strong that if you thought OKC was willing to do the move, then it would happen. But that's the first thing that kind of has me thinking, well, would this really be a thing? That's the first thing. The second thing is, I don't think the Lakers' offer for Chris Paul would be that good. I mean, I understand how it would work. Like, it'd be Danny Green and then KCP gets you to 23, unless KCP opted out, and that could open up some sign and trade potential, but even then KCP would still want to go to OKC. I mean, he would still have the power in that situation. Then it would be like JaVale McGee's contract, Quinn Cook's contract, Kuzma would have to be in there, the Lakers pick would have to be in there. Is that really that great of a move for Chris Paul? I don't think so. I think there are a number of teams who could make a better offer. The Knicks, they've got the Clippers picks, the Mavs picks. I think Julius Randle is a more interesting player than anybody that the Lakers could give the Thunder. Philly would at least have a lot of draft picks. I think between Shake Milton and Josh Richardson, those are a couple guys who you could argue are more interesting than anybody the Lakers could give the Thunder. Unless you think Kyle Kuzma is really good, I don't. But if I can at least try to see it from both sides, the way that it could happen would be if the market for CP just wasn't that awesome, with the idea being his age and his contract, pretty much, right? And so the idea would be, if you're OKC, you know what? With the Lakers, at least you're getting out of the money faster, because everybody you'd be getting would be on a one-year deal. So you get out of the money quicker. You do still get that pick, and in the case of Kuzma, it's a 25-year-old who could be an asset to somebody else, or maybe OKC would be optimistic about Kuzma. I don't know. But still, I think there's a number of teams that can put together a better offer than the Lakers can. Because the Lakers, they can also only offer one pick, because all their other picks for the foreseeable future are locked up with the Pelicans in some way. But those are not my only two reasons for why I think this doesn't happen. The third reason is if the Lakers actually managed to pull off this move and OKC liked what the Lakers were offering, then the Lakers would have to do a lot of shuffling around to fill out the rest of the roster, because they'd be trading a lot of guys who play a lot of minutes for them. I mean, I know everybody doesn't like Danny Green, and KCP's kind of wishy-washy, but like they play a lot of minutes, and you know, you'd probably have to have Kuzma in there as well. He gave them minutes, and then they would just have to scramble, especially because it seems like Rondo was going to opt out of his contract. I believe that was a thing that I saw. So even if OKC gave you a guy back who you felt okay about, the only two that I could see on the roster would be Baisley and Lou Dort, and even then, I'm not sure OKC would want to give you either one of those guys. There's a chance that your roster would just be way too thin by the time this move was over, even if you got CP, and we'll just say they got Lou Dort out of it as well. Then you're looking at, it would be CP, LeBron, AD. Let's say they managed to keep Caruso in this move, and then you got Lou Dort back. And then let's say they still had their mid-level, so they could use that on whoever. I mean, I don't really think Joe Harris, Serge Ibaka, or Jeremy Grant are going to be available. I think they're going to be re-signed by their current teams. So it's like you're using it on, what, Marcus Morris or something if the Clippers don't keep him? I mean, is that a better roster than what they've got currently? It could be, but that's also me being optimistic that they can, you know, shore up the rest of it. And one of the reasons why I would not be 100% confident in that roster is because while I acknowledge that Chris Paul's still very good, he's still getting a year older, and we should acknowledge that he was really lucky with his health this previous season. I mean, he played 70 games, he didn't get hurt in the playoffs, But I don't know how confident I am in that happening again. I mean, in his 2 years with the Rockets, he played 58 games. We know that one of those seasons was cut short for him because of a hamstring. And his last year with the Clippers, he played 61 games. So if I'm the Lakers, I would be trading a whole bunch of guys, thinning out my roster for a dude in CP who is a year older and has dealt with a decent amount of injuries. So even if the Lakers did a decent job of filling out the rest of the roster, which is not a guarantee that they'd be able to do, they would still be banking so much on Chris Paul being healthy. And by the way, that wouldn't just be for this upcoming season, but it would also be for 2022 as well, because there's no way they'd be able to get off of his $44 million. So basically, when you look at all the things that the Lakers would lose out on by doing a move for Chris Paul, between thinning out the roster, screwing up their cap space for after next season, and again, doing that for a guy in CP who he's 35 years old right now, he's dealt with injuries, I just don't think it's that safe of a bet. I mean, is there a world in which that move happens and Chris Paul is healthy both years and he's really, really good and he's playing off of LeBron and doing all that stuff? Yes, but I don't think the chances of that happening are high enough to do the move. And then when I combine that with the fact that I think the move that the Lakers could actually do would not be that awesome, and I think there are other teams who could make a better offer, I just don't think so, man. I don't think it's going to happen. I think if we are going to think about Lakers trades, I've been seeing the Derrick Rose thing a little bit. I think that's a possibility. I also think Schroeder on OKC is possible as well. I mean, I think Danny Green and the pick could get Schroeder. He's much younger and cheaper than Chris Paul, but even then, if you wanted to re-sign him, then you'd still be having that conversation about free agency past next season. So I think that's the thing to remember when we're thinking about any sort of a Lakers trade, is how does it affect the 2021 free agency. But with that being said, we got to remember, when you have LeBron James, you have to sacrifice cap space and young players and draft picks, and you have to go as all in as possible. So maybe that would be the thing that would win out, but I don't know, man. You force me to make a pick, I don't think it'll happen. If I had to pick one team for Chris Paul, I guess it would still be the Knicks. I mean, everything I just said about CP applies to the Knicks as well, but I just think with them there's a little more desperation and stuff like that. So, yeah, that's my 2 cents on this. It's been going around the internet a bit, and I figure I would just talk about it a bit.